Howdy, welcome back to my channel on building out a expedition camper, a complete DIY expedition camper built up from a complete scratch Total Composites box onto a custom four-wheel drive Fuso chassis. And today we're going to go into two different types of mounts for traction boards and shovels and things like that I'm mounting onto the rear walls of my expedition camper. You can see here the tape where those mounts are embedded within the walls, and then here is actually the completed storage mounts glued and screwed onto the walls on the rear there, and the two different types of mounts that I have. So we're going to get into today a little bit on those two different types of mounts, why I use the two different kinds, and how this went way easier than before. Well, if you saw my last video, I believe that's video number 93 of my DIY expedition camper build, you noticed that my friend John and I really struggled using the awning bracket mount that's inside the wall of my expedition camper with Total Composites construction to mount the L-track along the side that's going to be used as essentially an awning mount along that side. And it was really tough for a whole lot of reasons, mostly because that steel bar was somewhat unsupported and also recessed further into the wall than it probably should have been. But we did get through it, installed this L-track, got it on there, glued on and screwed on with about 30 bolts. It is super strong, but now it's time to go ahead and effectively do the same thing, put some L-track and also some half-inch deep 80-20 profiles on the back for mounting some other things and give some flexibility to mounting some things on the back. And I'm really hopeful this isn't going to go so bad, and it doesn't. But let me share how it goes and how I do it and how come it goes much better than this side awning mount. You can see that side awning mount here all completely installed. It looks really great. And of course now it's all that dry erase markers are cleaned up and all the holes are put in. And this is the little small turnover door I cut into the back, and I had to cut that in first before drilling these holes and so forth in for these different mounts to make sure that those did not get in the way of cutting in that door. So after that door got installed, I went ahead and used my basically a drill press hand mount to make sure I got some good holes that were going straight into these steel bars that are embedded into my rear wall. And I had 4 steel bars put into that rear wall, but I removed 2 of them in the middle of the upper wall here when I went ahead and built this upper wall. And the reason why is because I knew that they would just barely touch that rear window and conflict with it, and cutting that rear window opening with steel bars inside of there and that fiberglass track would have been extremely difficult. As it was, even just cutting through that fiberglass track is really challenging. So after getting those holes cut and getting everything aligned and getting those holes exactly where they need to be, not just vertically up and down but also side to side, and of course make sure they're not angled, then it's time to go ahead and start tapping those holes out.
I'm not going to tap them now that I have them all drilled down to their proper depth. Key thing is, after I tap them, is hope that they're all in the exactly right spot to match up with the L-track that I'm putting up. Trying to make sure I put on some more tapping fluid per tap. Doesn't really matter which one I start on. I'll go ahead and start on the bottom. And why I'm doing this by hand tap instead of an electric, putting a power tap into the power drill so I can really feel what's going on here. I've got not just the fiberglass and then the wood. I can feel it now capturing that metal. Obviously, additional friction of going the metal. I can feel the metal bar moving around a little bit. And part of the other benefit of this too is I can easily feel that resistance change when I hit the other end of that piece of metal bar. I don't want to keep going through into the foam. So right there, I hit it. Just want to make sure I go through all the way, pulled out. And then once I pull that tap out, and you can see how easy it is now, that's with really the whole drill at one undersize, but effectively it's probably about the same as what the tap should be, because a little bit of wobble and stuff I get in the bit and with the metal bar inside. Obviously blow that off. Try not to transfer that debris and stuff from one to the next. Matter of fact, that's why I brought my paper towel up here, so I can wipe that off. Keep that nice and clean. Move on to the next hole. Get that tapped. You can see I'm using a ratcheting hand tapper here, which is really nice. Sometimes it's better just to do this rotation like this, because sometimes also, just like with a ratchet, of course, when you hit that friction in the metal bar here, it's a little easier to start it in one hand direction or one hand position and just keep it in that one hand position, than to have to keep kind of rotating all the way around. Just get a little more force, power, comfort. Okay, there we go. I'm all the way through. Rotate the ratcheting adjustment so I can pull it out, and I can also put in the middle where it's basically fixed either direction, which is nice, but in this case, I just find it easier to just keep going around. So add a little more fluid again, and let's get that tapping fluid in the tap. I did a third of 8 holes on this side, and once I get all these in, I can remove this tape, and that's really part of the key reason why I'm doing this now, is because I'm going to remove this tape, clean it all up, and get these bars adhered on. And so the screws, the bolts are really, call it secondary, or they could be primary, but the glue is probably going to be plenty strong by itself. So, and it also seals up that bar and the holes as well, is given all the additional strength of about 500 pounds per square inch. And there's about 3 feet here, almost 2 inches wide. So you can do that math. It's a substantial amount of tension force. You know, we're talking, you know, several tons of tension force here. You know, just doing that quick math, 36,000 pounds of force, 18 tons of pull-up force just with the adhesive. So if you look at the space in between each of these holes, I believe they're 4 inches of spacing on the L track. And so, you know, it's roughly 4,000 pounds of tensile strength, roughly, you know, for this adhesive, whereas the screws themselves are going to be somewhere probably around that 50,000 with a tapped hole like this, you know, PSI, pounds per square inch, right? So when you look at it, the two are probably pretty equally as strong. It definitely adds strength. I'm using at least the steel bars that I had ordered inside this camper wall here.
And on the upper wall, the upper rear wall, I'm using actually an L track, and this angled L track, that's a flush mount or smooth mount. And I go ahead and you can see here, and I drill out the holes just at one size bigger than the 1/4 bolts that I'm using, just to make sure that I have a little bit of room in there to allow for any differences in the hole position, since it's really difficult to get those exactly aligned. And that just makes it a lot easier to go ahead and get this installed. So one little trick there. And these are 36 inches long, so they're quite long, and that gives me some really good adjustable mounting points up high, which I probably don't use very much, but at least this is going to be mounted there, so I can use it should I need to.
All right, let's go give this a try now.
And on the lower wall there, I'm using some 1/2 inch 80/20 profiles that'll be glued and screwed onto that. That's what I'm drilling the holes for right now. The reason I'm using this is because that way I have infinite adjustability for mounting anything in there to get exactly in the right position along that track.
Okay, we got all those drilled. Now, we're going to do a little countersinking. Well, I'm going to countersink these holes so that way this screw can recess down inside the hole here and be at least flush with that. So I'm going to set my depth, use my countersink tool. These are made for wood, but they do work on metal. They're pretty durable and about the same, everything's about the same as a wood bit, pretty similar anyways. So I'm going to drill these down, so it's going to vibrate a fair amount, but I can get that down to the right depth. That's the key thing I got to do right now. All right, so I've got this set pretty close to the depth. This is going to vibrate a fair amount, so I'm going to hold it pretty tightly, and especially because it's going to catch on the track here. But I'm going to let's hold it, try to keep it over the center of that hole. It's probably not going to make the smoothest countersunk, but the screws bit's going to, you know, the head's going to cover that up anyways. I'm going to try to get as close as I can to the center of the hole and get the right depth. Once I get the depth set, I'll set my depth stop in this, and then do the rest of these 4 and knock them out. Let's go see how this one goes. All right, you can see that's pretty good, right? And so if we put our screw in there, you can see that's just a little bit too deep. And so, which is okay. It's okay, it's a little too deep, but I can bring it out just a little bit, save me some drilling time. And so I'm going to do that. I'm going to do this next one right now, and then I'm going to come try this screw out, and then I'll just keep moving down the line here.
And countersinking just allows that bolt head to just get recessed into the track and be flush with the top of it.
So you can see that my countersinking bit went ahead and froze up there. So a little too much pressure, still a little too deep. So I'm going to bring this out again to stop it a little bit closer up. Doesn't need to go too much, but anyways, that's pretty good, I think. We'll see how that goes. And so we'll just keep working on the line here.
And after get these holes drilled and also countersunk, I also angle at a 45 degree the ends of these 80/20s just to make a nice smooth profile, and so those bolts are also now recessed in there nice and smooth for a very adjustable mount.
It's a fine little skill getting that just right. But you can see when it walks, it's really not that big of a deal, especially once the screw head's in here and it's pretty much flushed down. You really don't see any of that, and it's not really a problem where it's going to be a problem at all. So that's all good. We got those done. Now let's go and get these prepped for gluing in and installing. Okay, pretty exciting moment. I am removing, I think, what's going to be about the 2 last pieces of tape that have been on here since the beginning of when this camper was built, in order to mark out these steel bars that are inside of this wall here. And now they remove the light marker tape on the inside. Now it's just these outside ones. And what I have found is this blue tape, unlike the green tape, does tear a lot more and is a little bit more difficult to remove off. But it does remove off. Just sometimes you can see I have to do a little bit of scraping there. And then I can simply suck up the little debris and stuff here, and I'll come back over this and clean this all up with some rubbing alcohol really nicely. So let's get this one other blue tape off, clean these up, and then I can go ahead and glue up these L tracks on here, along with on the lower section here too, which is really, really exciting now that all these holes are in and tapped and ready for the different tracks. Really cool. Okay, now that all these holes have been drilled and tapped, now let's go give us a test fit. Let's hope that my dimensions, all my holes, everything I marked, are right on. I put a little mark on this. There we go, to indicate the top side. Holes are all equally spaced, but just make sure I get it just right. I gotta look to make sure not just vertically, but also side to side. The littlest bit off on any one of these I found is very problematic. And it's amazing how they can just get off, you know, just the littlest bit. Okay, is this a lot of extra work to go ahead and screw all these in and make sure that I have all my holes lined up? Yeah, totally. It's a lot to go through and do all this. As far as, it's another probably 5 minutes per one of these. So yeah, it kind of sucks, but I feel like I need to do it because once I have glue on here, if these holes don't line up, then there's really nothing I can do at that point.
So I go ahead and put all the bolts in to make sure that I have everything perfectly aligned before I go ahead and apply the glue, and then put the final bolts in to screw it and bolt it down onto the wall.
Before I fall off this ladder, and before I come up here with a bunch of adhesive sealant, and I'm going to screw at least one of these in, check for my length. I'm just going to go by feel on the length.
And I can feel when they go all the way through that steel bar and start going in the foam, so that we can make sure I have the proper length of bolt.
I was looking at the tap depth to see how far it's going. Oh shit. And that's how we break cameras. Whoops, sorry about that, camera.
And now the final step in this process is pretty darn exciting. Get everything all cleaned up, and that means gluing up. And once I get everything all cleaned up all at once, I can go ahead and apply the glue, the adhesive sealant, to each one of these, both 80/20 and the L tracks, the back of them. Apply a nice big bead all the way down, get that perfectly lined by the holes that I can see through into the holes, and apply the bolts and start tightening them down and get them all on there. And I want to do this all at once because once I open that tube of adhesive sealant, I want to use it for all of them. And so I got to move pretty quickly here because that tube of adhesive sealant will start drying out pretty quickly. So got to get these down there and of course get them bolted and tightened down. Not so much that all the glue squeezes out, but enough that it really gets well spread evenly across the bottom of each of these bars or 80/20 profiles. And you can see in these 80/20 profiles here in the bottom here and the top of them that they are cut at a 45-degree angle, so it gives a nice smooth profile on the back here. So now my camper has 6 beautiful mounts on the rear storage wall, 2 up high and 4 down low. The 4 down low have an infinite adjustability. The ones up above, these L tracks here, have the adjustability about every inch or two wherever their position is. They're all incredibly strong, well mounted on, sealed up to the back of that camper into those steel mounts. And they also provide a little bit of extra protection on the back camper. So I'm pretty stoked to have this done and move on to the next set of projects for this camper build.
Looks pretty good. Just got to get the end caps on. Beautiful.
So there you go. Now I've got some nice mounting points on the back wall. I can put a nice awning that can swing out to the side on the rear wall, so that way it's aerodynamic, out of the way of tree branches and things like that getting hit. And also on the lower wall, I can mount some, max tracks or other traction boards or some shovels and things like that. There also is my spare tire carrier, which is not being mounted to the rear wall, but instead mounted to my bumper that will be in front of these, and so it'll be a little bit of a kind of hidden access port there. But I'm glad to have this done and that these went very well, much smoother. So here's what it looks like when it's all done. And of course, I have a lot of future videos coming up on the rest of this camper build, the painting of it, the rest of the interior build out, the cabinetry, and of course, so much more. So thanks so much for watching. Hope you did share it. Please do share and enjoy with others. Thank you, and look forward to seeing you on my next video.